shadow of silence.
The genocide in Gaza unveiled. "Do you hear that?" whispered Amira, her eyes glistening with fear as distant explosions echoed through the shattered walls of Gaza. In the dim light of dawn, the streets of Gaza bore the scars of relentless bombings and the anguished cries of mothers who had lost everything. The air was thick with dust and despair, and yet life clung stubbornly to the broken earth. Amira, a nurse in the last standing maternity ward, had seen horrors that words could not capture. Women, heavy with the promise of new life, lay on blood-stained sheets, their bodies trembling from both labor and fear. The sterile scent of disinfectant battled the metallic tang of blood, while the rhythmic beeping of failing machines filled the air with a haunting melody. In the heart of this chaos stood Dr. Idris, a man whose soul bore the weight of countless tragedies. His hands, once steady in delivering new life, now trembled as he stitched wounds that bombs had ripped open. He had long learned to suppress his emotions, but when he looked into the eyes of newborns, he saw a future that might never come to pass. "This is more than war," Idris muttered to Amira as they fought to save a young mother whose body had been torn apart by shrapnel. "This is the systematic erasure of a people." The world beyond Gaza's crumbling walls watched in silence. The United Nations' latest report had dared to call it what it was: genocide. Yet, the voices of the oppressed were drowned out by the thunder of warplanes and the indifference of powerful nations. The anatomy of genocide. To understand the gravity of the UN's accusation, one must delve into the deliberate targeting of Gaza's healthcare system. Maternity wards, IVF clinics, and women's shelters were reduced to rubble. The intent was clear: to cripple the very core of life itself. In international law, genocide is defined as acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The destruction of reproductive facilities, the starvation of civilians through blockade, and the targeted killings of entire families painted a chilling picture of intent. Yet, the world remained paralyzed. The media diluted the truth with phrases like collateral damage and defensive measures. Political leaders walked a tightrope of diplomacy, fearing the wrath of powerful allies. Voices from the rubble. Among the survivors was Farid, a poet who had lost his wife and unborn child in an airstrike. His words, once filled with hope, now dripped with sorrow. "We were seeds beneath the soil, crushed before we could bloom. Our wombs turned to tombs, and our cries echoed in empty skies." Farid's words spread like wildfire across social media, igniting global protests. From London to Jakarta, millions marched, demanding justice for Gaza. The unyielding silence of power. In the grand halls of the United Nations, diplomats argued over resolutions while bodies piled up in Gaza. Israel's prime minister dismissed the accusations as political theater, claiming self-defense against terrorism. The United States, a staunch ally, vetoed every attempt to impose sanctions. How can we speak of justice when the world's conscience is sold to the highest bidder? Thundered Layla al-Rami, a Palestinian delegate, her voice trembling with rage and despair. Yet, within the shadows of power, a quiet rebellion brewed. Human rights lawyers, investigative journalists, and whistleblowers began to leak classified documents, revealing the strategic targeting of civilian infrastructure. The world's eyes, once blind, began to open. A mother's last breath. Back in the shattered remains of the maternity ward, Amira held the hand of a dying mother, Noor. With her last breath, Noor whispered, "Tell my daughter that she was born in the land of resistance. Tell her to never forget." Noor's infant wailed, a fragile symbol of defiance against annihilation. And in that moment, Amira vowed to never let the world forget. The reckoning. As international pressure mounted, the International Criminal Court launched an investigation into war crimes. Israeli generals and political leaders faced arrest warrants, and nations once complicit in silence began to sever ties. But justice, like life, was slow to bloom. For the people of Gaza, the scars would never heal, and the shadows of the fallen would forever haunt the land. And yet, amidst the rubble, children played with makeshift toys, and mothers sang lullabies to their newborns. For in the darkest corners of humanity, hope was the most powerful weapon of all. This is only the beginning of an in-depth exploration. Would you like me to continue expanding this narrative with more character arcs, historical analysis, and geopolitical perspectives?